Montana Territory, 1883. The wind cut sharp across the dry fields of Clover Bend, rattling the barn doors and lifting dust in low, tired swirls. On the porch of the Odell farmhouse, Virginia Odell stood with her arms crossed tight over her chest, watching the empty horizon like maybe someone would finally come. No one ever did. At 39, Virginia had long since stopped expecting miracles. The town had labeled her a spinster years ago, and the whispers only got louder after both parents passed and her brother moved east to chase railroads. She stayed behind, tending to the land alone, the hem of her skirt always dusty, her hands always busy. She did not regret staying, but she regretted the silence. That morning, as she moved through the barn pitching hay, the sound of hooves broke through the usual quiet. A single rider approached, the sun behind him. As he got closer, she noticed the way he rode like someone who had not yet been worn down by the land. He was younger, maybe 10 years her junior. Broad-shouldered, wiry, with a sun-browned face and eyes the color of wet bark. He dismounted quick and smooth, his boots hitting the ground with purpose. "Ma'am," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Name's Elias Rowen. I heard you were looking for help." Virginia stared at him. "I put up a notice 3 weeks ago. Just rode in from Butte," he explained. "Saw it in the mercantile there. Said you needed someone for early spring planting." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I did. Still do." He nodded once. "Then I am here to help." They shook hands. His grip was firm, his palm warm. She noticed the calluses. Not just a drifter, a worker. That night, she made stew and set a plate across from hers at the wooden kitchen table. Elias sat polite, quiet except to thank her. He ate like someone who had spent too long chasing meals. "You married?" he asked, not looking up from his bowl. She blinked. "No," he paused, then glanced up. "Shame." Virginia let out a short breath. "Why is that? Seems to me a woman who runs a place like this deserves more than just land for company." She did not say anything to that. Did not know how. Over the next few weeks, Elias worked from sunup to sundown. He fixed the fence behind the chicken coop, repaired the storm-damaged roof, and dug irrigation trenches where the land dipped. Virginia watched him from the window sometimes, unsure why her chest felt tight when he laughed, or why she always made twice as much food now. One afternoon, while they were working side by side near the edge of the field, he said, "Folks in town talk about you like you are some kind of ghost." Virginia dropped her hoe. "Do they? They say you are too old for marriage. That no man wanted to take on a woman with a dying farm." She stiffened. "That true? I think it is foolish," he said. "You are stronger than any man I have worked with." She picked up the hoe again, ignoring the heat in her cheeks. A week later, he found her behind the barn. She was kneeling in the dirt, planting onions. Her hands were shaking. When he approached, she did not look up. "I was supposed to have children," she said. "That was the plan. I waited too long, I guess. Now folks just look through me." "I see you," Elias said softly. She looked up then. His eyes were steady, gentle. "I do not want pity," she said. "I am not offering any." That night, after dinner, he reached across the table and took her hand. She let him. Spring came fast that year. The creek filled, the wheat grew, and the nights got warmer. Then came the storm. It hit fast, tearing through the valley with wind that snapped branches and sent roof shingles flying. Virginia ran to the barn to get the animals safe, but she slipped in the mud and hit the ground hard. Her ankle twisted under her. "Virginia." Elias's voice cut through the wind. She tried to get up, but the pain shot through her leg. He reached her in seconds, lifting her up like she weighed nothing. She clutched his shoulders, fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt as he carried her inside. Later, as she lay on the settee with her foot bandaged, Elias sat beside her. "You scared me," he said. "I have been through worse." Still, she reached for his hand. He curled his fingers around hers. "I have been called too old for a lot of things," she said. "But you make me feel like I still matter." He leaned in close. "You do. More than anyone ever has to me." She looked into his eyes, and what she saw there made her heart ache in a different way, soft, slow, steady. Why me? She asked. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because you never quit. Because you gave me a chance when no one else did. And because I wake up every morning hoping I will hear your voice first. She kissed him then, her hands on his face, his arms wrapped around her. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was sure. And from that night forward, neither of them ate alone again. By late April, the soil had softened enough for planting, and the wheat rows stretched in straight, hopeful lines across the lower field. Elias worked without needing to be asked. His quiet steadiness filling spaces Virginia hadn't known were hollow. They spoke less during the day now, but not for lack of things to say, just that the air between them had grown full of understanding, like the hush that comes before a summer rain. One morning, as the sun climbed over the cottonwoods and turned the frost on the grass to steam, Elias arrived at the porch carrying a parcel wrapped in brown cloth. Virginia looked up from the table where she was sorting seed. "What's that?" He set it gently beside her. "Something I traded for in town last week." She folded back the cloth. Inside was a pair of leather gloves, the stitching tight and even, the fingers carefully shaped. "I saw the raw spots on your palms," he said. "Thought these might help." She ran a thumb over the soft inside lining, her throat tightening. "I told the woman at the mercantile they were for someone strong," he added. "She handed me these without a word." "They're well made," Virginia said, her voice quiet. "So are you." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, crossed to the wash basin, and poured water into a tin cup. When she turned back, he was still watching her. "I used to think anything done for me came with a price," she said. "Not from me." She nodded once, then slipped the gloves on. They fit snug. She flexed her fingers, and something inside her eased. That afternoon, they walked the perimeter fence together, checking for new gaps. The wind rolled low through the grass, and a pair of meadowlarks trilled somewhere near the creek. Elias paused near the western fence post, resting his forearm on the top rail. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Not in a long time." "Why not?" She looked out across the fields. "I'm not sure the world past those hills has room for me." He turned to face her. "It would, if you wanted it." She met his gaze. "And you? What did you leave behind when you came?" He looked down at his boots, then out toward the tree line. "My father's ranch, near Ennis. When he passed, my brothers divided it like meat on a table. I didn't want scraps." "You walked away from land?" "I walked away from what they made it into." Virginia leaned against the fence beside him. "You miss it." "Sometimes. But I'd rather build something new than live in something broken." The silence between them held weight but not distance. That night, after the lanterns were out and the house had gone still, Elias lingered on the porch. Virginia joined him, her shawl pulled tight against the evening chill. Stars burned cold above the dark ridgeline. "My mother used to sit out here like this," she said. She'd hum a tune from Virginia, said it reminded her of summers before the war. Elias tilted his head. "You ever sing it?" "I don't remember the words. Just the way she sounded when she sang them. Like she wasn't afraid." He looked at her, his voice low. "Are you afraid now?" "I think I'm afraid of wanting something too much." He stepped closer, not touching her yet. "Then I'll be careful with what you give me." Her breath left her slow. "I've never had someone say that. I've never meant it so much." She turned to him. Her hand found his, not by accident but by choice. He didn't move, just let her fingers settle into his. "Warm, sure." Below them, the wheat stirred in the dark, whispering promises only the wind could carry. And inside the quiet, Virginia began to believe that something lasting might grow from this earth yet. By mid-May, the snowmelt had soaked deep into the gullies and the cottonwoods along the creek had leafed out full and green. The land was waking fast, and with it, so was something between Virginia and Elias that neither of them rushed to name. They simply moved through days as partners until one morning brought a letter addressed in her brother's hand. Virginia held it unopened in the yard, the chickens clucking around her boots. Elias, coming back from the far field with mud on his trousers, paused when he saw her face. "Bad news." She tucked the envelope into her apron. "He's coming to check the property." Wants to be sure I haven't let it go to seed. Elias wiped his hands on his thighs. You think he's after it? He's always said I'm better off selling. He thinks I've stayed only because I don't know any better. Elias nodded once and didn't press. 3 days later, Thomas Odell arrived in a hired buggy out of Billings, dressed in a striped linen coat that looked more suited to bank halls than open country. His mustache was trimmed sharp and his eyes swept the house and fields like he was reading a ledger. Place looks held together, he said, stepping down stiffly. Virginia didn't smile. It's more than held. Thomas's gaze shifted to Elias, who stood a few paces behind her, quiet. Who's this? Elias Rowen, she said. He's been working here through the spring. Thomas narrowed his eyes. I see. They ate supper in silence. Thomas pushed food around his plate as if tasting it might be a concession. Afterward, Elias excused himself to the barn. Virginia didn't stop him. Thomas leaned back in his chair. You're not getting younger, Ginny. You should think about selling while the land's still worth something. I'm not selling. Then marry. Find someone to shoulder this with you. She stood and began clearing the dishes. I'm not your burden to balance, Thomas. He watched her a long moment. Is that cowboy the reason you won't leave? She didn't answer. Later, she found Elias oiling a harness in the tack room, the lantern casting his face in soft gold. My brother doesn't think much of you, she said. I gathered. She leaned against the post. He thinks you're a hired hand with ideas above your station. Elias didn't look up. And what do you think I am? She exhaled slowly. I think you've earned the right to be asked what you want. He set the harness down. I want to stay. If you'll let me. Her chest tightened. Even if it means being talked about? He stepped closer. I've been called worse things than yours. She reached for his hand. His fingers met hers. Firm, warm. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. The next morning, Thomas stood under the sycamore by the gate, his hat in his hand. You've made up your mind then, he said. Virginia nodded. I have. He studied her face. You've changed. I've stopped waiting for someone else to claim what's mine. Thomas looked toward the barn where Elias was leading out the mare to water. He's not what I pictured for you. No, she said, her voice steady. He's better. Her brother climbed into the buggy without another word. That evening, Elias found her in the root cellar sorting potatoes. He knelt beside her, brushing dust from her sleeve. Was it hard? He asked. Saying no always is. He took her hand. Then let me say yes. She looked at him, the lantern light pooling in his eyes. Yes to what? To the porch in the morning. To the field rows straight as you're stitching. To your voice at the end of the day. She swallowed. Do you mean it? I've never meant anything more. They stood there in the earth-cool dark, hands clasped, breath shared. And above them, through the narrow cellar window, the sky turned the color of river stone, the stars coming on one by one, quiet, sure, and lasting. The first Sunday of June dawned with the kind of stillness that only came after a week of hard wind, sky clean, air close and warm. Virginia stood at the basin in her bedroom, twisting her hair up with steady fingers. She'd fetched her mother's brooch from the old chest the night before, and now she pinned it at her collar, the silver catching the morning light. Downstairs, Elias was already at the stove, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a cast iron skillet hissing with cornmeal batter. She paused in the doorway, watching the way he moved, unhurried, certain, like a man who'd finally stopped running. I thought I'd do breakfast today, he said without turning. You fed me long enough. You always this bold before church? She asked, folding her arms. He glanced back. First time I've had a reason to go. She let that settle. They hadn't spoken of church since the thaw. But something about this morning made the idea feel less like habit and more like declaration. They walked together, the dirt road dry beneath their boots, wheat fields on either side brushing high against the wind. The church sat at the far edge of town, whitewashed and narrow, with a bell that rang once and no more. As they stepped through the door, conversation hushed. Heads turned. Virginia kept her back straight, her chin level. Elias offered a polite nod to the pews. They took seats together near the front, and though no one said a word aloud, the air behind them stirred with quiet judgment. After the sermon, as folks gathered beneath the cottonwoods, Reverend Harlan approached with his wide hat in hand. "Miss Odell," he said. "And Mr. Rowen, is it?" Elias nodded. "Yes, sir. I believe this is the first time we've seen you both here together." "We figured it was time," Virginia said. The Reverend looked from one to the other, his gaze not unkind. "You're planting more than wheat this season, I take it." Elias rested a hand lightly against her back. "We are." The Reverend smiled faintly and moved on. A few women shifted near the pie table, their glances veiled but sharp. Virginia stepped away from the crowd toward the shade where the ground sloped down toward the creek. Elias followed, boots crunching soft in the grass. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to," he said. "If we're building something, I don't want to leave any part of it outside." She turned to face him. "They'll talk." "They already are," he said. "Let them." She studied him. "Did you ever think this me might be more than you meant to take on?" "I thought you might be more than I deserved," he said. "But I never doubted I wanted you." The wind picked up then, rustling through the cottonwood leaves like distant applause. Virginia reached for his hand, not out of uncertainty, but surety. That evening, back at the homestead, the porch caught the last spill of sunlight. Elias sat sharpening a blade, and Virginia stitched a tear in the apron she'd worn for years. With the chores done and the air cooling, a stillness settled between them that didn't ask for filling. She laid her sewing aside. "There's a parcel of land beyond the creek. I've never done much with it." Elias set down the blade. "It's good earth. Never turned it myself," she said. "But I think it wants something planted." He looked over at her, eyes steady. "Then we'll plant it." She nodded once, then leaned her head against his shoulder. Behind them, inside the house, the windows caught the reflection of dusk. Two figures side by side in quiet silhouette, nothing hurried, nothing uncertain. Just a woman and a man building something with their hands and their hearts and not needing the world's permission to do it. The summer sun settled deeper into the valley with each passing day, softening the hills and drawing the scent of wild sage through the air. Clover Bend slowed in the heat, and with the fields in good health and the animals thriving, Virginia found her hands less full than they'd been in years. One afternoon, Elias rode out early to fetch lumber from a nearby mill. Virginia stayed behind to mend a sagging hinge on the chicken pen. But when she rose from the ground, a sharp pull beneath her ribs made her pause. She pressed a hand to her side, breathing slow until the tightness passed. She didn't mention it when he returned. That evening, Elias hauled a bundle of cedar planks to the porch and leaned them against the wall. "I thought I'd frame in that lean to buy the barn," he said. "Might make a good smokehouse come fall." Virginia stood in the doorway, arms crossed lightly. "You always think 3 seasons ahead?" His eyes met hers with quiet amusement. "I figure if I'm staying, I ought to work like I mean it." She stepped down beside him. "You've earned more than a smokehouse. I thought about asking Harlan to come out next week." She turned toward him, brow furrowed. "For what?" "Thought we might make this place ours properly." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his wrist and held it, her thumb brushing over the rough edge of his cuff. "I never imagined I'd marry in my 40s, she said softly. "I never imagined I'd want anything permanent," he replied. "But here I am." Her voice came almost too quiet for the wind to carry. "Yes." The next morning, she rode into town alone. She needed cotton thread and a length of muslin, and though she hadn't sewn since her mother's passing, her fingers itched for the work. Old Mrs. Lambert at the dry goods counter raised her brows when Virginia requested white fabric, but said nothing. Back home, Virginia cleared the small room by the kitchen where her father had once kept his ledgers. She swept the floor, dusted the sill, and opened the window to the east. Then she unfolded the cloth and laid it across the table. By the end of the week, the fabric had taken shape beneath her needle, simple, clean lines with a hem finished by hand. "I thought you didn't favor white," Elias said when he caught sight of it. "I didn't," she said, smoothing the seam. "But this isn't for show. It's for truth." They stood beneath the sycamore on a Sunday morning with Reverend Harlan reading from a pocket Bible and the wind stirring the grass at their feet. The neighbors came more than Virginia expected. Some stood with folded arms, others with quiet smiles. Thomas didn't return, nor had she expected him to. Elias wore his work shirt brushed clean, and Virginia wore her muslin dress with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. She didn't carry flowers. She didn't want them. When Harlan finished, Elias took her hands, thumbs pressed over the backs of hers. "What comes next?" she asked. "We live it," he said. They kissed soft, certain, and without spectacle. Afterward, they returned to the house, where the porch had been swept clean and the table inside bore a fresh loaf of cornbread and a crock of honey. Elias uncorked a jar of cider, and they ate in the quiet light of early afternoon. That night, Virginia lay beside him, her fingers tracing the line where his collarbone met his shoulder. "I never thought peace would feel like this," she said. "It took a long road to find it," Elias murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "But we are here," she whispered. Years passed, and each season laid its own rhythm down across the land. The smokehouse rose, and the fields doubled. By the third summer, the apple trees Virginia had planted long ago bore fruit heavy enough to bend their limbs. Elias built a cradle from leftover cedar, and when the baby came a girl with his eyes and Virginia's quiet mouth, they named her Clara, after no one but the wind that shook the wheat the day she was born. They never spoke of what they'd left behind. Not because it didn't matter, but because what they built together had made the past smaller. In the evenings, they sat on the porch with Clara asleep inside, the hills glowing soft behind them. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. What they had didn't need filling. They grew older. Wrinkles came, and with them a deeper steadiness. The land kept them honest, and each other kept them whole. And in the quiet that only comes from a life rightly lived, Virginia and Elias stayed together, always rooted like the trees that lined their fields, unshaken and sure.